Meet the Changers, a team of young vigilantes that hail from Jersey City. They strive to uphold their own version of justice using a cosmic energy named xonerate to do battle. Criminals, supervillains, supernatural threats, and sometimes even the law will stand in their way, but only through discovering themselves and overcoming impossible odds will they eventually carve their place into the universe. Today, you're going to be seeing a sneak peek on how the Changers animated comic dub will be made. The Changers has gone through a few incarnations with various art styles and mediums at play. Each version of the series has a different art style, and it took many years for me to find a look that rides between graphic and expressive. Because of the fact that I'm developing the Changers with both comics and animation in mind, I've worked over the past several months to make my art style more loose and simple. The main 4 team members went through years of tweaking before I finally settled on designs befitting them. Here is the main model sheet for Cheyne. I should probably say this now, that even though a lot of the main characters in the Changers are based on myself and other real-life people, they're not exactly one-to-one copies. I wanted each main member of the Changers to kind of represent a different aspect of the team, and to have that be reflected in their physical designs. There's kind of this visual language in character design theory where triangles are more so dynamic, sometimes villainous, and evoke speed. Rectangles evoke stability, and rounds, circles, ellipses evoke friendliness or familiarity. I try to incorporate that theory into my character designs without it being overly obvious. Cheyne is mostly composed of rectangles and triangles, which together provide a sense of sturdiness and reliability, but also kind of a dynamic edge. Someone you can rely on, but not necessarily going by the books. I also think about posture a lot when I'm creating these model sheets. I think just one pose of a character, that first impression that you get, can say a lot more than words ever could. For Jay, she's mostly composed of rounds, some rectangles here and there, but for her design I really wanted to hammer home the approachability, the friendliness, but still make it so that you can tell she can hold her own ground, you know what I mean? Her posture also really delivers that message. Zaire is mostly composed of rounds and triangles mixed together. He's definitely the most laid-back member of the Changers, but he still has a level of dynamism that matches the rest of the team. You'll notice that even though he has triangles, which kind of, like I said before, evoke dangerousness or dynamism, they're slouched down and they're rounded. Even though I break these character designs into 3 simple shapes, just the way that these shapes can be drawn will drastically change a character in the way that they appear to the audience. Ivy is pretty much all triangles with some curves here and there, and her lean build and that energetic yellow really just implies the fact that she'll kick your ass and start roasting you while she does it. I wanted to evoke quickness and agility and a little bit of instability, and also that posture pretty much evokes complete confidence. Imagine being that kind of character. Before I go forward, I should mention that I use many references in tutorials. There was a time in which I thought that using references was cheating. It's not. There is literally no other way to learn unless you have a basis to go off of. This doesn't just mean basic, anatomy references or gesture drawing references, even though that probably will help you the most with your fundamentals, but I feel like studying artists that you really, really respect and applying your own individuality to their practices is going to elevate you to the next level. The Changers art style is mainly derived from 2000s, late 90s, early 2010s action cartoons and anime that I used to watch as a kid, and I do still watch now in some respects. I'm talking about stuff like Justice League, Teen Titans, Danny Phantom, Secret Saturdays, Jackie Chan Adventures, Spectacular Spider-Man. I also grew up with the Disney Renaissance films, Lion King, Aladdin, Hercules, Beauty and the Beast. Those movies are really good for studying expression and gesture. Also, I study a lot of comics. Stuff like Jack Kirby, John Romita, George Perez.
Superman. Okay.
I've also started studying a ton of Japanese comics. Dragon Ball, Bleach, Naruto, One Piece. So usually I have an arc outline, an episode outline, and a screenplay for that specific episode. I then translate the cues that I give myself from the screenplay into storyboard form. Keep in mind that I have to board for webtoon, traditional comics, and animation all at the same time. Because these same panels are going to be seen on multiple size screens, the action needs to be as clear as possible. Big poses and dynamic framing. Previously, I used to have a storyboard, then a first sketch, then a second sketch, and then I did line art. That took way too long. Because my art style is more flexible now, I find it easier to go straight from my board to my line art. I wouldn't recommend doing this right when you start out because it takes a lot of line confidence to do that successfully. Also, I have a custom brush which makes my job a lot easier. For coloring, it's actually pretty simple. I use the fill tool set on all layers in Clip Studio Paint. I don't know how it is for other programs, but Clip Studio Paint makes it really easy. I've pretty much made picking colors a brainless, zero IQ job because I have already made a color sheet that I can just take any color from. When it comes to shading, I use blue, green, and red lines to determine which should be shadows, which should be second shadows, and which should be highlights. I do this using a vector layer in Clip Studio Paint, and then I color in the shading using a separate layer below the vector layer. Don't use anti-aliasing when you're shading. It'll make sense later on. Keep those lines pixelated. I use After Effects and I try to keep compositing to a minimum because I don't want to overstimulate my scene, especially because I want the animated comic dub counterpart of my series to be comparable to the on-panel version. But don't get me wrong, there are some visual enhancements. When making the comic dub version of a cut, I export individual layers from Clip Studio Paint and import them into After Effects as image files. Then I add whatever effects and filters apply to that specific cut. If it's a blur, I'll add a blur. If I need a pan, I'll add a pan, especially for parallax, that's very useful. Learning how to composite in After Effects is a whole different beast and I feel like it's deserving of another video. There's also the process of editing in Premiere, dealing with sound design, learning which sound effects to choose, and figuring out how to incorporate music. Nonetheless, this was a small look into how the Changers comic dub is going to be made. Thank you for watching.